I will say, and I think this goes to your credit, that was one of the biggest after party attendances I'd ever seen.
Oh, really?
In Texas Theater. So yeah,
that was literally the biggest attendance I'd ever seen. Period. I know that they've filled it once or twice in the past, but I've never been there and seen full like that.
It's funny how that works too, because I remember you were commenting on how you had done a couple of screenings there before, and there was just a little smattering.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's got to be very gratifying to see that.
It's incredible. That's why I've got to take photos of it now. Like when I see an audience coming to see this movie that is that big, it's something I don't want to forget.
Yeah. This was obviously a much smaller kind of intimate personal tale, especially coming off of what you've just done.
Yeah.
The obvious question I think a lot of people would want to know is, what for you is more relaxing or gratifying? I mean, it's cool to work on a really big movie with a big budget and a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, but when you have something like this where it's more personal, is that more gratifying in a lot of ways?
It is. It's more gratifying to be doing something on your own terms, for sure. That's just a nice feeling. But making this movie was way more stressful than Pete's Dragon.
Yeah.
Because I was doing it on my terms and I was the one calling every single shot.
Right.
So it was a horror show in many ways for me, because I was just constantly just stressing over whether it would work, whether the ghost would work, whether it was going to just all fall apart. So it wasn't relaxing at all.
Yeah.
There was satisfaction to be found in doing it, but it was, I feel my beard got a little grayer over the course of the shoot. And Pete's Dragon was really hard too. That was funny. That I thought that making a big studio movie there would be a cushion, that kind of allows you to relax a little bit, and that's not the case whatsoever. So I now know that no matter what the size or scale, movies are just really hard and really stressful. And if you are putting yourself in the hot seat, paying for the movie yourself and calling every single shot, you have a lot more pressure on yourself. So it's a toss-up. They're both hard. They both have their pluses and minuses, but ultimately the pluses in both cases far outweigh the minuses, and that's why we're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah. I forgot to do an intro, so let me do this real quick.
Oh, great.
And then I'll cut it. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Walters from BigFanboy.com. I'm sitting here with the great David Lowery, and we are going to discuss the ghost story.
Use the espresso machine, yeah. Exactly.
It's that always gets me sometimes. So one of the other things I thought was really great about the film, and I was actually talking, Ashley and I were just talking about this, was that I know this is a low budget production, but there were certain aspects of it that made me feel like this feels very epic in scale, particularly, I won't spoil anything, but there's a building construction that happens, and the visuals of that, and then going into a different time period that I also don't want to spoil for people that haven't seen it. But there were aspects that made me think God, this feels like a big epic movie that I think maybe in the hands of another director, I don't know that would have succeeded. So congratulations on giving it that kind of feel and whatnot. And was that something that you thought about, or was that just sort of something that kind of organically worked when you tried it?
It organically worked. As I was writing the script, which was a very fast process, a day or two, I began with the house and the idea of a ghost being stuck in one house. And I got to page 20 and felt that I didn't want to be in the house anymore, but I wasn't done telling the story. So I just started to take it to the next step, the next level, and I kept expanding it. And it gradually became what it became, and took on a more ambitious quality. I find myself unable to make simple movies. They just keep always getting bigger. I'm adding locations. Things just start to spread out in my films, and I can't help it. And then when we were shooting it, obviously we shot it in a square aspect ratio, so it's automatically less epic than you normally would, expect from any. You think about a movie in widescreen, it's going to naturally have a breadth to that image. It's going to have some degree of scope, and we're limiting ourselves to a 1:3 aspect ratio. So then it became a really fun challenge because when you're in the house, you can employ that aspect ratio to build in a sense of claustrophobia and feeling trapped. But once that house is gone and the story starts to expand, it was definitely fun to try to figure out how to make the movie look epic without actually falling back on the tropes of traditional widescreen imagery that we're all trained to create or to think about. So when you think about a Western, you automatically think about a rectangle. You just want to see that landscape.
Yeah.
And we're like, how do we make this feel that way, but in a square?
Yeah. That's funny you say that too, because I mean it does evoke certain qualities of the Western.
Yeah.
And in your storytelling and whatnot. I actually really dug the aspect ratio. Like that one guy mentioned it last night. It was very interesting to see that you use that. So again, I think congrats that you were able to get away with that, because not everybody could probably pull that off. You shot this in Irving, Texas.
Correct.
Where did you find that house? Was that easy to find, or was it a difficult challenge?
In the grand scheme of things, it was easy to find. We knew that we had to have a house that we could have free reign of, and that would be, that we would be able to just, for all intents and purposes, destroy. And so my producers had the brilliant idea of getting in touch with a demolition company and getting a list of condemned houses or houses that were slated for demolition.
Yeah.
And so we got that. They provided us with that, and then we just drove around and looked at them, and if they looked right, we started calling the owners. And it turns out like a lot of really nice houses get demolished.
Yeah.
Like we found a bunch in Highland Park that were really nice homes that were only being demolished because the owners were tired of them. It was like, man, that's sad. That's a really nice place. But we found this house in Irving and instantly got attached to it because it just looked right. It had the right feel. It felt just rural enough, but still felt like it was in a city. And it looked like the house that I moved out of when I went to make Pete's Dragon, which added an emotional layer to it that was important to me.
Yeah.
And the owners of the house were incredibly helpful in every stage of the production. They at first it was just like letting us use their house, and then it became helping us fix the house up so it was suitable for shooting, and then it became letting us use their granddaughter as Rooney Mara's stand-in, and then it turned into coming and help us shoot that entire Pioneer scene, moving and trucking stuff back and forth, from Dallas out to Meridian where we shot that scene. It's like they were there every step of the way and went far beyond the realm of just being the owners of the location. They became an integral part of the filmmaking process. So that was a really nice thing. A nice discovery along with their house that they let us completely take over.
Yeah, I know everybody always wants to ask you about it, and I wish that I didn't have to go here, but the pie scene is just so, I think in so many different ways, impressive. It's impressive watching her do it. It's impressive that you staged it the way that you staged it, and it's impressive the effect that it leaves on you when it's over, because I really found myself mesmerized, and then afterwards I thought, I was totally fixated on watching a woman pie, but it was just because it's the expression of grief and what she's going through. But I'm curious, like, first of all, did she really get sick? Because I don't know if I could eat that much pie and not get sick in that quick succession, It just felt very real. The whole scene felt extremely real.
It was, we all knew that it was an important scene. And I talked to Brittany about it a lot beforehand. And I think she was a little nervous about it, as anyone would be, because you're exposing something of yourself. You don't normally do that in front of people.
Sure.
And that was the intent of the scene, to have something that was uncomfortable, very private, and very emotional. And I knew that if we could nail it, then we would have done all we needed to do for her as a character. That was like the scene that grounds her as a character, and grounds the idea of the ghost being someone who merely is able to watch.
Right.
And that you can't participate. And so my job was to figure out where to put the camera and to make sure that Rooney knew what the emotional content of the scene needed to be, which she did. From the very beginning, she's a wonderful actress. She reads the script and knows, like, okay, this is the scene where I get emotional. That's the point of the scene. And then let it be as simple as it needed to be. So, there's two shots. There's the one where she comes home, finds the pie, finds a bunch of other stuff. That one was very choreographed. We spent a lot of time rehearsing it, blocking it through, figuring out where she was going to go, how the camera was going to move. And then she sits down. And so we did 2 takes of that first shot, and then the second one we set it up. And I told her, take it as long as you need to take it. Make it as long as it needs to be. If you do need to get sick, that's okay. But otherwise, just keep going for as long as it needs to go, and when you're done, you're done.
So that was a one-take scene.
It was a one-take scene.
That's
the only
amazing.
thing we did, and she didn't really get sick. But
I would have understood it.
I
if
told
she
you, I
had.
was like, look, you need to throw up at the end of the scene. No judgment. That's fine. So it was there was no there was nothing casual about it. We were very studious in our approach to it, and we really were determined to make it work, especially because we knew we'd probably only have one take at it. And once we started shooting it, a great weight lifted off all our shoulders. As we were watching it, it became clear that it was going to be a momentous scene. It was going to have the weight that we wanted it to. And the reason why everyone asks about it and why I keep talking about it is because it's working. It's a scene that is profound and it's truthful and it's strange and unusual and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortably long, but at the same time it's mesmerizing. And
I couldn't look away from it.
It functioned on every level that I wanted it to, and as such, it's my favorite scene in any of my movies is that scene. I can watch it all day long. Like when we were, going through the final stage of post-production, you have to watch the movie over and over and over again to make sure the mix is right and to make sure everything's playing just right. It gets very tedious, but that's like the one scene where I would always find myself forgetting that I was watching my own movie, and I would get completely caught up in it, and then it would end, and I'd be snapped back out of it, and almost like rudely awakened because it has that completely captivating, mesmerizing quality that it's almost like you're being hypnotized, but at the same time, it's incredibly emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a scene that I think inherently it's very uncomfortable to watch it, but I couldn't look away because she's so incredible, and I'm sure you felt the same way on that. Yeah, it was an amazing sequence. And then of course I got to ask the question, what kind of pie was it?
It was a vegan chocolate pudding pie from Spiral Diner. So fans of the
Shout out
movie
to Spiral Diner.
can go to Spiral Diner and request. I mean, I don't know if they make it on the menu that often, but they made it
The
before.
grief pie.
It's it's the sadness pie. It's baked with a widow's tears.
Was there ever a moment, because you guys were shooting this in secret, was there ever a moment where you thought, oh crap, people are going to find out? Like how hard or how easy was it for you to kind of keep this under wraps?
It was easy. I mean, there was a stage early on where I wondered if someone would still believe this. But once we started shooting, I stopped worrying about that. And we didn't do it in secret because we wanted to, surprise people. We did it in secret because we weren't sure it would work.
Yeah.
We thought we might fail. We thought that the ghost might just be a complete disaster. We thought it might just be too goofy. We thought maybe it would make a good short film, though, at the end of the day, if it didn't work in the future. So we wanted to leave ourselves room to not succeed.
Yeah.
Even though we desperately hoped that we would, and we were putting our all into it. It was just such a risky endeavor, such a high concept idea. I wasn't confident that we would 100% execute it the way I thought it needed to be. And so by not telling anyone about it, that relieved a great deal of pressure because there's zero expectation. As soon as people start, as soon as a movie gets announced in the trades, there's a level of expectation. And as soon as people start looking forward to it, there's another level of expectation. And I wanted to put that off for as long as possible. So it wasn't until, 2 days before Sundance announced their schedule that anyone knew this existed. And then once Sundance announced it, then the pressure starts building, then the anticipation starts building. And luckily the movie seems to have perhaps confounded people, but nonetheless, lived up to a certain amount of expectation. But I didn't want to have that expectation on us while we're shooting. So
I totally get that. Another thing I wanted to ask about was, and somebody did bring this up last night, of do you believe in ghosts? Have you had an experience yourself?
It's funny, in doing press for this, I dredged up an old memory of myself as a child in the house that I moved to in Irving when we first moved to Texas when I was 7 years old. And it is almost exactly what happens in the movie when the little boy wakes up in bed in his bedroom with his sister and sees the ghost. It was exactly the same thing, and I had completely forgotten about it. And until I was doing this interview, and all of a sudden that memory came back, and I realized, wow, well, in addition to just ripping off Poltergeist, that scene is clearly something that was planted in my subconscious being that I was 7 years old, I don't really believe I probably saw a ghost, but at the time I definitely thought I saw like a weird child's spirit lurking in the doorway of my bedroom closet, and so that's, you know, that's one thing. I shot a short film, you know, many years ago, around 2000, and was in a haunted bed and breakfast somewhere near Waco, and there were a lot of weird things happening on that shoot, weird phenomenon, and you could explain them all away if you wanted to, but I like not explaining them all away. I like letting there be the possibility that it was supernatural, because that makes life more exciting, and makes, you know, that little touch of mystery to add some spice to day-to-day proceedings. And I would rather live in a world where I'm scared to, you know, walk into my living room at night without turning the lights on because I'm afraid that I might see something in the dark, than live in a world where I'm just completely complacent with it. So I choose to believe in ghosts because I want that possibility to exist. I don't really think I've ever seen one, but there's been enough out there in my life, enough phenomenons that I could explain but choose not to, that I'm leaving the door open.
That's a great way to put it. And then the last thing I want to ask you about before we wrap this up was, you've already finished your next project, which you're now editing.
Yeah.
Where do you go from here, and when are you going to give yourself a break at this point? Because it seems like you've been going nonstop for like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
You deserve a break.
I keep saying that right now. You know, I'm editing this movie, The Old Man and the Gun, that we just finished shooting, and I don't have another movie lined up, so technically I could be looking at a break. Editing for me kind of is a break, because you gotta just sit down. You know, it's like you gotta spend some time in a dark room, and that's, you recharge your batteries while you're doing it. But it's stressful in its own, because, you know, right now I'm dealing with the fact that we just did the first assembly. The first assemblies are always a disaster, and you freak out, and you're just like, this movie's gonna be terrible. And then you spend the next 6 months figuring out how to make it not terrible. But I'm curious, I'll find out in the next few months if I'm actually going to allow myself to take a break, or if I get antsy and start figuring out something new to make. And
do you have a project in mind, maybe?
I'm writing a couple things, so I'd have to get the scripts done first. But I've also got 2 short films that I've written that I want to make, so I might just go do those.
Well, I have to say, there's a moment in this film, and again, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but there's a moment that I wasn't expecting to see that kind of alludes to the idea of, you know, futuristic things. And when I saw it, I immediately thought to myself, I wonder what it would be like if David Lowery did like a futuristic sci-fi movie.
Oh, I'd love to.
Is that something you thought about?
I was working, and technically still am, like I had this sci-fi film that I was going to do with Casey that got announced around the time when The Body Saints came out, and I never quite got the script right, and we're still kind of working on it, but I couldn't get the script right. But it was a science fiction film through and through, and so it's definitely something I want to do. And then I've got this other project that I'm trying to get the rights to, an adaptation that would be straight up sci-fi as well, and a really big movie. And I don't know if I will be able to get made, but it's definitely a genre that I want to delve into and that I love. And I love small sci-fi as well as big sci-fi. I like the idea of doing something, you know, as small as Eternal Sunshine, or even smaller than that.
Like Primer.
Like Primer, yeah, exactly.
Great,
But then also something as gigantic as Mad Max, you know, that, or I was talking earlier about the Lucas movie coming this summer, which looks terrific. As a huge Fifth Element nerd, to see him delve into that world again is really, really exciting. I'm really pumped about that movie. So, you know, whatever version of a science fiction movie I make, it's inevitable that I will make one. And that little glimpse in this movie is of the futuristic Dallas skyline from Blade Runner. Blade Runner meets Dallas is the first, you know, tiptoe in that direction.
I think you reined it in enough to where it didn't look outrageous. It was like, yeah, I could see that in like another, you know, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I could see the Dallas skyline looking like that. So.
Dallas looks kind of, you know, it's got enough crazy lights. It's starting to look like Blade Runner.
Yeah, the Omni Hotel.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll have more information down below where you guys can check out info on A Ghost Story. And I guess because you talked about it last night, so I guess we can plug it here. Do you want to talk about the Ghost Store?
Yeah, I like They just went public with it this morning, and A24 is opening up a ghost store in New York. And if you go to the website, which is, I think it's a ghost.store.
We'll put it down below.
It's you can get your own
custom Halloween
bedsheet, yeah.
ghost story costume. That is fantastic.
But the store in New York is crazy. It's like it's a full. I mean, it's a luxury shopping destination with one product.
That's so great. David Lowery, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Really appreciate it. It's good to finally sit down.
Yeah, absolutely. Long time coming.
Yeah, I know. It's great.